In 1965, archaeologists in China discovered a perfectly preserved 2,400-year-old weapon. Central China, 1965. A team of archaeologists are exploring a network of subterranean tombs when they locate an ancient, waterlogged casket. Prizing it open, the experts find a human skeleton and a sealed wooden box. And within that box is a sword, a beautifully crafted instrument that no one has set eyes on for some 2,400 years. Swords have long represented power within human societies. For warriors of so many cultures and times, the weapons have been seen to symbolize strength, chivalry, and masculinity, as well as war. Indeed, this is reflected in the plethora of hero myths that have survived through the ages, from King Arthur and Excalibur to the Greek myth of Perseus. And the Far East, too, has much to offer in this arena. The so-called Sword of Goujian, discovered in the Chinese tomb in 1965, is an incredible cultural treasure. Its workmanship is sublime, and its physical properties are extraordinary. And its discovery in modern times has allowed historians to take a look back into an ancient world. The sword was uncovered in the province of Hubei, whose name means north of the lake, a reference of the expansive Lake Dongting in Hunan province. The Hubei area was inhabited by humans during the Neolithic times and is considered to be one of the birthplaces of Chinese civilization. And naturally, Hubei province has a rich and intriguing archaeological record. At its heart, the province consists of a sprawling, ultra-fertile alluvian plain called Zhangjian. The plain is surrounded by several mountain ranges, including the Jing, Daba, Wu, and Wudang mountains, with the highest peak climbing to more than 10,000 feet. And the Yangtze River runs through Hubei, with one of its larger tributaries, the Han River, joining it in the Zhangjian Plain. The plain is also punctuated by numerous lakes, giving Hubei the moniker Province of Lakes. Additionally, thanks to its many hydroelectric dams, it has a number of artificially created reservoirs. In fact, the region is currently home to the largest dam in the world in terms of electrical output, the Three Gorges Gravity Dam on the Yangtze. The Sword of Goujian was found during a survey of the Zhang River Reservoir's second aqueduct, which is located in the city of Jingzhou. This urban center is a 2,000-year-old hub of culture and history that was once the illustrious capital of the state of Chu, a kingdom that lasted for 411 years and saw a succession of 20 kings. Now, while investigating a section of aqueduct in the Jiangling County, the archaeologists discovered a series of 50 tombs, apparently constructed during the Chu era. And so, in October 1965, they commenced digging. Over the next 3 months, the team would then go on to recover a haul of more than 2,000 artifacts. The casket containing the Sword of Goujian was discovered in a tomb situated about 4.3 miles from the ruined city of Ying. Said bygone city was another old capital of Chu, in its case located close to contemporary Guangzhou. And the newly discovered sword attracted international media attention and was arguably the most important discovery of the entire dig. The sword, it transpired, was forged during the so-called Spring and Autumn period. This was a time in the history of China that lasted from 771 to 476 BC. The name, meanwhile, comes from a set of records written during this time that describe the affairs of the state of Lu. Known as the Spring and Autumn Annals, these records contain accounts of major events in the region, such as battles, marriages, deaths, and rituals. The annals are traditionally thought to have been assembled by the pivotal Chinese philosopher Confucius and remain a key historical source. In fact, they're regarded as one of the 5 classics of Chinese literature. The Spring and Autumn period began in 771 BC with the destruction of Haojing, the capital of western Zhao. Defeated by the Quanrong, the Zhao king escaped to the east and founded the Eastern Zhao dynasty in the capital of Luyi. However, his power over the region was far from absolute. In order to hold his empire together, the Zhao king had relatives and loyal generals manage parcels of it as their own fiefdoms, which then gradually evolved into separate states. The 12 most powerful states were known as the 12 vassals, and representatives from the states met frequently to strategize and collaborate, particularly in matters of warfare. But as time went on, the kingdoms began to quarrel among themselves. Warfare in Hubei led to gradual establishment of numerous small states, transforming the map of the region. In fact, some 148 states were noted in the Spring and Autumn Annals, but this was reduced to just 20 by the end. Naturally, the period was marked by ongoing technological developments, particularly in the production of weapons. Some fine swords were designed and forged during this era, often over a number of years. And the Sword of Goujian was one such weapon, itself a product of tremendous skill and labor. The sword of Goujian is 21.9 inches long and weighs just a little under 31 ounces. Tapering to a pointed tip, its blade is 1.8 inches in width at its base, and the hilt or handle of the sword measures some 3.3 inches long. Meanwhile, the surface of the blade on both sides is etched with diamond patterns, and the hilt is lightly embellished with blue stones. It has silk bindings, and its rounded pommel consists of some 11 circles that share the same center. Great care, then, was seemingly taken in the design and construction of this sword. But what makes the weapon truly special is its remarkable state of preservation. Despite having spent more than 2,000 years in a water-soaked tomb, it was discovered completely untarnished, as well as being deadly sharp. Indeed, researchers found it quite capable of slicing through a pile of 20 sheets of paper. Now, while the sword's airtight sheath helped protect it from the elements, its metallurgical composition also contributed to its longevity. The blade consists mainly of copper, bestowing it with flexibility, but the edges contain extra tin, which gives them an enduring sharpness. Traces of sulfur throughout also reportedly help to protect it against tarnishing. As for the owner of the sword, well, he's named specifically in 2 columns of engraved script on both sides of the blade. The writing is a type of seal script known as birdworm, after the fuzzy strokes that define its characters. Seal script derived from so-called oracle bone script and was in popular use through the spring and autumn period. The inscriptions of the sword reveal then that it once belonged to a local king, King of Yu, it says on one side of the blade, made this sword for his personal use, it says on the other. However, the words do not specify exactly which King of Yu made this sword. Now, the Kingdom of Yu was a regional power that lasted for approximately 160 years, until its annexation by Chu in 334 BC. Some 9 different kings ruled over the state during that time, and so in order to determine the sword's owner, a group of historians started to share their theories in a series of written letters. After several weeks of discussion, the scholars began to develop a broad sense of the sword's history. It's believed that it belonged to Goujian, a warrior king famed for his grit and determination in difficult times. In fact, Goujian participated in the last Great War of the Age and is thought by some to have been one of the 5 hegemons. The 5 hegemons were essentially a succession of regional warlords who had the power to mobilize the considerable military resources of the Zhou Empire. In effect, they were responsible for maintaining peace and unity throughout the region, and they were tasked with defending it from outside aggression. But before he could become a hegemon, Goujian first had to prove himself worthy. Inheriting the Yu crown from his father Yun Cheng, Goujian became king in 496 BC and immediately faced an existential challenge. King Helu of Wu, a neighboring state and long-running enemy of Yu, perceived vulnerability in the Yu court and gathered his armies for an attack. The feud between Yu and Wu was rooted in failed diplomatic strategy that ought to have tied the 2 kingdoms. The marriage of a Yu princess to a Wu prince. But the marriage failed, and when the princess fled to her home country, it caused enough bad blood to start a war. However, King Helu's opportunistic attack turned out to be a grave misstep. In the Battle of Zuili, he was roundly defeated by Yu and left with mortal injuries. Before dying, though, he instructed his son Fu Chai to take revenge for his defeat, thereby committing future generations to the cycle of war. Never forget Yu, Helu apparently told him. 3 years later, Wu and Yu then faced off again. This time, however, it was Wu who emerged victorious, and he even took Goujian prisoner. And yet Goujian was not executed, nor even kept in a locked cell. Instead, he was forced to suffer the symbolic indignity of acting as Fu Chai's attendant. Goujian's ordeal lasted just 3 years before Fu Chai allowed him to return home. So, his royal power restored, Goujian assembled a team of seasoned counselors and diplomats to help strengthen his kingdom. And at the same time, he began pursuing a strategy of weakening Wu and its infrastructure with unofficial inducements and conspiracies. There is an old Chinese idiom that's said to partly refer to Goujian's dogged persistence: sleeping on sticks and tasting gall. During his reign, Goujian did not indulge himself in worldly extravagances. Instead, he ate as simply as the common folk and even forced himself to consume bile as a reminder of his captivity in Wu. And in the end, Goujian's persistence paid off. According to a historical chronicle written by the Han Dynasty in 94 BC and known as the Shiji, a decade of focused statecraft had transformed Yu into a regional powerhouse. After 10 years of reforms, it says the state is rich, the warriors well rewarded. Now, before striking at the Wu capital, Goujian had waited for Fu Chai to guide his armies northward for a separate confrontation with the state of Qi. What's more, the attack was a success, and Goujian even succeeded in killing Yu, the crown prince of Wu. Then, in 473 BC, Goujian again laid siege to the capital, and this time the city endured for 3 years before falling. Interestingly, Goujian was known for some bizarre and terrifying tactics on the battlefield. It's said, for example, that he would fill his front lines with self-destructing soldiers, and their function seems to have been to frighten the enemy by committing suicide, sacrificing themselves in a spectacle by slicing their own throats. Now, despite Fuchai having shown him clemency years before, Goujian refused to accept Fuchai's surrender, and he was therefore forced to kill himself. Then, upon assuming control of Wu, Goujian purged the Wu court by executing its scholars. In what was perhaps a wise yet undoubtedly cruel move, the triumphant King Goujian did not spare his enemies. Goujian subsequently reigned over the kingdom of Yu for 31 years until his death in the year 465 BC. Then, around 10 years later, the wider region entered a new phase of history known as the Warring States period. This was a time typified by an intensification and escalation of interstate conflicts. In 334 BC, 6 generations after the reign of Goujian, King Wuzhen of Yu was readying to invade Qi. The king of Qi dispatched a diplomat to convince him to attack Chu instead. And yet the attack failed, Wuzhen was defeated, and the kingdom of Yu was subsequently conquered by Chu. The Warring States period actually continued until 221 BC. This was when the state of Qin conquered all 6 of its major enemies, and China was unified under Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of Qin. And while the Qin dynasty was short-lived, lasting just 15 years, it did introduce a new form of Chinese imperialism that lasted until 1912. Today, the sword of Goujian is currently on display in Hubei Provincial Museum. In 1994, it had been lent to a museum in Singapore but was accidentally damaged. And since that incident, the sword has been added to a list of artifacts that are not allowed to be removed from China. Meanwhile, in 1983, archaeologists had discovered a remarkable companion piece while digging in Jiangling, a spear belonging to King Fuchai of Wu. Like the sword of Goujian, the spear of Fuchai is engraved with birdworm script. Belonging to King Fuchai of Wu, it says, made for his personal use, this spear. Hubei then has a particularly rich cultural and historical legacy. Priceless artifacts found there, such as the sword of Goujian, recall a distant past filled with kings and warriors. And who knows what other archaeological treasures may be waiting to be unearthed in this area in the future.